I like to think of myself as a pretty patient guy. Takes a lot to really piss me off. But if you send me dozens of fake fines and then show up to my house with a smug grin, expecting me to roll over and comply? Well, congratulations, you just activated my petty revenge mode. But let's rewind a bit. This all started when I inherited my grandfather's house. Now, this wasn't just any house. It was old, solid, full of history, and built like a goddamn fortress. It had been in the family for decades, and my grandfather had poured his soul into maintaining it. The man was stubborn as hell, and he hated HOAs. He used to say, "No one's gonna tell me what color my damn door has to be," so naturally he never joined one. Took me a few months to wrap up my life in the city before I could fully move in. But when I finally did, I was greeted by an overflowing mailbox stuffed with HOA violation notices. At first, I thought it was some kind of clerical error. Wrong address, mistaken identity, something stupid like that. The fines were for ridiculous things. $75. Unapproved lawn height. $50. Trash bins visible from the street. $200. Unauthorized exterior paint color. The kicker? I hadn't even moved in yet. The house had been sitting empty for months. So, like any reasonable person, I tossed the letters in the trash and went about my day. Fast forward a couple of weeks. I was finally starting to settle in. Unpacking boxes, fixing up a few things, enjoying the fresh air, when I checked the mail again. Even more fines. And this time, the letters were getting more aggressive. Final notice. Pay immediately to avoid further penalties. Immediate action required. Failure to comply will result in escalating consequences. Okay, now I was annoyed. I was about to call and tell them to check their damn records when I suddenly heard someone clear their throat. You ever hear a throat clear that just oozes entitlement? Like someone is about to ruin your day on purpose? Yeah, that's what I heard. I turned around, and there she was. Blonde bob cut. A pastel-colored blouse that screamed, "I demand to speak to the manager." Expensive-looking sunglasses that probably cost more than my first car. And, of course, the clipboard. Karen. "Hello there," she chirped with an overly sweet smile. "I wanted to personally welcome you to the neighborhood." I already didn't trust her. Thanks," I said, wiping sweat off my forehead. I'd been in the middle of wrestling a broken lawn chair when she popped up out of nowhere. She clasped her hands together. "It's just so wonderful to see someone moving into this home again. Your grandfather was such a character." "Oh, I bet he was. I'd heard the stories." Grandpa had spent years dodging HOA nonsense. Karen continued, tilting her head in that fake-friendly but also condescending way. "Speaking of which, I just wanted to remind you that you have some outstanding HOA fines that need to be taken care of. Here we go." I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, about that. My house isn't in an HOA." Her smile didn't even twitch. "Oh, but it is now. We voted to include it last year. You're officially part of our wonderful community, which means you'll need to bring your property up to standard." I stared at her. "You voted my house into an HOA? Without my permission?" She nodded, still smiling like a goddamn Stepford wife. "Yes, it was a unanimous decision among the board members. We're all about maintaining neighborhood value." I let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Yeah, no, that's not how property ownership works. My grandfather would have set this house on fire before signing into an HOA." Karen's smile faltered just a little, but she recovered fast. "Oh, well, that's unfortunate," she said, her tone dripping with fake sympathy. "But the fact remains you need to comply. I'd hate for things to escalate." She handed me a printed list of everything I needed to fix and a bill for all the unpaid fines. Then she flashed me one last fake smile and turned, walking away like she hadn't just threatened me with financial ruin. I stood there for a long moment, gripping the paper, feeling my irritation slowly morph into something sharper. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some dumb clerical error. This was deliberate, and Karen had just made it personal. I spent the rest of the evening pacing around my kitchen, rereading every single fine and notice. Something wasn't adding up. First off, how the hell did they vote my house into an HO? I'd never heard of something like that. Was that even legal? Second, why were they hitting me with fines for things that had been the exact same way for decades? My grandfather had never gotten fined for his yard. The house had been the same color since the 80s. And third, why did Karen seem so confident that I'd just roll over and pay? I had a very, very bad feeling about this. So, instead of sleeping, I spent the next few hours digging through everything. County records, HOA documents, anything I could find online. And what I found? Oh, it was bad. My house was not in the HOA. Never had been. Legally, they had no power over me. Karen was straight up lying. And the worst part? This wasn't the first time she'd pulled this stunt. But I'll get to that later. For now, let's just say, I wasn't going to ignore Karen anymore. No, it was time to fight back. You ever have that feeling when something stinks, but you can't quite put your finger on it? Like when you walk into your kitchen and smell something foul, and after searching for 20 minutes, you finally find that one rotten potato at the back of the pantry. Yeah. Karen was the rotten potato, and I was about to drag her into the sunlight. After Karen waltzed into my driveway and tried to strong-arm me into paying fake HOA fines, I decided it was time to take a deep dive. First stop, the county office. I took a little trip downtown, went up to the records department, and asked for everything they had on my property. The clerk, an older guy with the aura of someone who had long stopped giving a crap, lazily typed my address into the system. Click-clack, click-clack. He frowned at the screen, then turned to me. Your property's not in an HOA. I nodded slowly, trying to keep my face neutral. Yeah, I figured. Can I get a copy of that? He printed out the official records, complete with stamps, signatures, and everything I needed to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Karen was full of shit. Armed with my newfound ammunition, I headed home. But I wasn't done yet. If I was going to tear Karen's empire down, I needed to understand how it worked. So I got my hands on a copy of the HOA bylaws. It took some digging. Turns out they don't just hand these out to people they're trying to scam. But eventually, I got my hands on one. And what I found? Oh, Karen was so screwed. According to their own damn rulebook. First of all, the HOA cannot forcibly include a property without the owner's explicit consent. Secondly, they have zero authority to issue fines on non-HOA properties. Thirdly, their entire existence is based on voluntary participation. In other words, they had no power over me whatsoever. I could have stopped there. I had the proof I needed to shut Karen down. But I was curious. How far did her corruption go? And that's when I started talking to the neighbors. Turns out, Karen had been terrorizing this neighborhood for years. I went door to door, casually bringing up her name, and let people vent. And oh, did they vent. She fined me $100 for having non-regulation flower pots on my porch. She sent me a warning because my dog was too loud. While I was out of town, she tried to tell me I wasn't allowed to have a pickup truck in my driveway. Like what? But the worst story. Oh, you don't know about the Andersons? I leaned in. No. What happened with the Andersons? The neighbor, an older woman with sharp eyes and a deep-rooted hatred for Karen, crossed her arms. Karen stole their damn house, and that's when I knew. This wasn't just about me. Karen had been pulling this scam for years. The Andersons were a couple who had inherited a house, just like me, except they hadn't moved in right away. They'd taken their time, fixing it up before moving there. And Karen? She saw an opportunity. While the house sat empty, she started slapping fake HOA fines on the property. Thousands of dollars in violations stacked up. The Andersons, not knowing any better, didn't fight back. They didn't appeal. They just assumed they had no choice. Then, when they failed to pay, Karen pulled a fast one. She claimed the HOA had absorbed the property due to unpaid fines. She then sold it to her own goddamn cousin for pennies on the dollar. The Andersons did not realize what had happened. They were tricked out of their home. Hearing this, I felt my blood go cold. This wasn't some petty power trip. This was straight-up fraud. Karen wasn't just annoying. She was a thief. And I was about to make sure she never got away with it again. At this point, I had everything I needed, Firstly, county records proving my house wasn't in the HOA. Secondly, HOA bylaws proving Karen was overstepping her authority. Thirdly, testimonies from multiple neighbors about her harassment. Fourthly, a goddamn stolen house. But I wasn't a lawyer. And if I was going to bury Karen, I needed one. Luckily, I knew a guy, Mike. Mike was an old childhood friend who had grown up to become a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a vicious, loves to destroy corrupt people kind of lawyer. So I gave him a call. Mike, dude, I haven't heard from you in forever. What's up? Me, oh, just chilling, drinking coffee, trying to stop an HOA dictator from stealing my house. Mike, I need details. Right now. So, I told him everything. The fake fines, the intimidation, the Andersons, the fraud. By the time I finished, there was a long pause. Then he let out a slow, delighted laugh. Mike, oh man, you want to destroy her? Me, Mike, I want to ruin her. Mike, good, because I just cleared my schedule. With Mike's help, we crafted the perfect response. Step 1. A legal notice challenging every single fine and recognizing their illegality. Step 2. A formal complaint to the county about Karen's fraudulent activities. Step 3. Reaching out to the Andersons. See, here's the thing about legal cases, they don't just disappear. And now that we had multiple victims, Karen wasn't looking at a slap on the wrist. She was looking at fraud charges. And the timing? Perfect. Because the very next day, Karen came back. I was in my kitchen pouring myself a cup of coffee when I heard the familiar sound of knocking on the door. I opened the door and of course saw her, with a notebook in her hand, smug as ever. Just a friendly reminder, she said, tilting her head. Your time to pay those fines is running out. I smiled. Oh, I'm not paying. Karen's grin widened. That's fine. You'll come crawling back to me soon enough. I stepped closer, lowered my voice. Actually, I think you'll be coming to me. She frowned. What? I leaned in just enough to watch her expression. When the county and the courts find out about the Andersons, Karen's face drained of color. I let the words hang in the air, then added with a smirk, yeah, I know everything, and I've already started the case. Then I took a step back and slammed the door in her face, leaving Karen standing there with her jaw practically on the ground. You ever watch someone realize in real time that they've just screwed themselves beyond repair? Like 1 second they're standing there all smug and self-important, and the next, boom, their entire world crashes down around them. Yeah, that was Karen. And let me tell you, it was glorious. After I shut the door in Karen's face and left her standing there, pale and frozen, I did the only logical thing. I grabbed a beer, sat on my sofa, and enjoyed the absolute meltdown that was about to unfold. I didn't have to wait long. The very next morning, my phone rang. Mike, well, that didn't take long. Me, oh, Mike. Karen's lawyer just contacted me. I nearly spit out my beer. Karen had a lawyer? Oh, that was adorable. Mike was practically giddy. They're trying to clarify misunderstandings and resolve this issue amicably. Translation. Karen was panicking. I leaned back in my chair, grinning. Tell them I'm open to resolving it. Right after she hands over a written confession and resigns from the HOA. Mike laughed. Oh, I like this version of you. Me too, Mike. Me too. Not even 2 hours later, I heard it. That goddamn throat clear and a familiar knock on my door. I took a deep breath, plastered on my best, oh, what a surprise, face, and opened the door. There stood Karen. But this time, she looked different. The confidence was gone. The smugness had evaporated. She looked rattled. Oh, this was going to be fun. She forced a tight-lipped smile. Hi there. I wanted to, talk about the fines. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Oh, what about them? Karen let out a nervous little laugh. Well, I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. Perhaps there's a way we can come to an understanding. I raised an eyebrow. An understanding? She nodded eagerly. I'd be willing to waive some of the fees if you're open to cooperating with the HOA. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Oh, sweet summer Karen. I tilted my head. So let me get this straight. You illegally fined me, tried to claim my property was part of the HOA when it wasn't. And now that I have legal backing, you're the one who wants to come to an understanding. Karen shifted uncomfortably. Well, I just think we should handle this like adults. I smiled. Great idea. In fact, my lawyer thinks so too. Her face twitched. I continued, voice calm but firm. Karen, I asked you nicely twice to stop harassing me with fake fines. You refused. So now, I'm going to enjoy watching this whole thing burn. She froze. You don't have to do that. I leaned in slightly. You shouldn't have done it either. And with that, I shut the door in her face. A day later, the real chaos began. Mike had filed the legal complaints and now the county was involved. Turns out, they really don't like it when some random suburban dictator starts fraudulently stealing property. And Karen? She was about to learn that the hard way. By the end of the week, the HOA was officially under investigation. Karen's entire board was being audited. Multiple homeowners had come forward with more their own horror stories. The best part? Mike had filed a formal cease and desist order against Karen personally, barring her from any further contact with me or my property. Karen, of course, was losing her goddamn mind. She sent emails, letters, even tried to have one of her board members talk to me. Every single time I forwarded it to Mike. And every single time he responded with legal threats. It was beautiful. At this point, Karen was cornered. But instead of accepting her fate gracefully, she did what every narcissistic tyrant does when they realize they're losing. She doubled down. One evening, just as the sun was setting, I heard a knock at my door. I opened it. And there she was. But this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a large, burly guy in a suit. Oh, this was going to be good. Karen crossed her arms. I'm here to make you an offer. I sighed. Karen, you are legally not supposed to be speaking to me. She waved a hand dismissively. That order was frivolous. The man behind her stepped forward. Mr. Mitchell, my name is Richard. I represent Mrs. Whitmore. We'd like to discuss a settlement. I smiled. Oh, I'd love to discuss a settlement. Karen perked up. But I won't be talking to either of you about it. Her face fell. I pulled out my phone, hit a button, and held it up. Hey Mike? You're on speaker. Mike. I was wondering when this would happen. Richard. I don't think that's necessary. Mike. Oh, I do. See, Karen here is already in violation of the cease and desist, which I'll be reporting first thing tomorrow. But since you're both here, let me be clear. There will be no settlement. There will be no understanding. There will be consequences. Karen turned bright red. Karen, you can't. Mike. Oh, but we can. In fact, expect a formal lawsuit by the end of the week. Richard muttered something to Karen, who looked like she was about to explode. I smiled sweetly. You both have a great night. Then I shut the door. Karen's downfall happened fast. Within a month, the HOA's entire leadership was dissolved. Karen was facing fraud charges for her involvement in stealing homes. The Andersons got their house back. Karen was publicly disgraced after a local news outlet picked up the story. And Karen? She moved out, disappeared, gone. No more Karen. No more HOA dictatorship. And me? I spent that first peaceful, HOA-free morning sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee, grinning like an idiot, because I didn't just beat Karen. I buried her.